selective memory and its manipulation. Specifically, we're exploring these really sophisticated mechanisms, how false memories aren't just formed in one person's mind, but how they spread rapidly, get weaponized, and form what some thinkers call a consensus reality, or a hyperstition. You know, the idea that fictions we believe in actually shape real outcomes. So the central question that comes out of the science here is pretty crucial. Does this documented structure, this linguistic fragmentation and hyperstition, does it define an inescapable structural cage that governs how we all see reality? Or is it actually a predictable, manageable mechanism that maybe counterintuitively empowers us to resist these manufactured false memories? I'll be arguing that the conflict built right into our language creates an immediate and unavoidable structural weakness in how we think.
And I'm going to approach it, well, slightly differently. I absolutely concede that this structural flaw exists. But I'll argue that our precise scientific understanding of the mechanics of it all, the timing of neural signals, the math behind how memories decay, this actually gives us the necessary scientific defense against manipulation. Understanding the system's limits isn't giving up. It's the first step to getting free from them.
Okay. So the core of my position is that collective false memory is basically structurally inevitable. Why? Because the human mind operates under this constraint. You might know it as the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. Language doesn't just describe reality, it actively sculpts it. It forces these unified neural experiences we have into, frankly, artificial and often contradictory boxes. And that's where the cage gets built.
Right.
So to see this clearly, just look at two feelings we all know, feelings crucial for our sense of time: nostalgia and déjà vu. Brain imaging shows they're really expressions of a single system. I mean, they share a demonstrable 70% overlap in activated brain regions, and they operate with identical oscillatory signatures. Functionally, the brain treats them as almost the same thing, these temporal experiences. But then our language steps in and forces these unified experiences into a binary, a linguistic rift, you could call it. One is yearning for the past, the other is experiencing the present as the past. This contradiction, it generates unavoidable cognitive dissonance. And look, this isn't some slow burn philosophical issue, it's an instantaneous architectural flaw. These neural binding conflicts, they happen within a terrifyingly quick window, 100 to 200 milliseconds, of trying to slap a linguistic label on something. Think about that. Before you're even consciously aware of the word, the language structure itself has forced a tiny conflict in your brain. That speed, that immediacy, makes this structural flaw inescapable, and it guarantees our vulnerability to a hyperstitional attack.
That's an interesting point on the immediacy of that structural flaw, though I would frame the implications quite differently. I accept the linguistic rift exists, absolutely, and that it generates dissonance instantly. However, the fact that we have a scientific understanding of its exact mechanics, that's the key. It transforms it from some inescapable cage into a predictable, measurable sequence, one that we can model, predict, and importantly, counter. We're not just blindly susceptible here, we actually have a roadmap.
Okay.
For instance, we can directly see false memory formation using event-related potentials, ERPs, which track brain electricity. We know exactly when the original memory gets unstable and when the new, false one, is being installed. The frontal N400 component, for example, it usually signals a semantic mismatch, like reading a wrong word in a sentence. Here, it acts like the brain's little error flag, signaling memory instability. The original truth is sort of fighting back. And right after that, the late posterior negativity reflects the brain actively installing the new memory file, the replacement. This whole process is so systematic, so sequential, that algorithms based purely on these ERP signatures can predict if an original memory will be corrupted with 72% accuracy. That's significant. Furthermore, we know that things like linguistic reminders create these critical 24 to 72-hour vulnerability windows during memory reconsolidation, when the memory is being pulled out, updated, and put back. This level of measurable precision gives us a real scientific defense. It gives us a precise target, temporally speaking, for observation or even intervention.
You're focusing on intervention timing and prediction, which, okay, fine. But that ability to intervene arguably only exists because state actors created the chaos in the first place. And the Benowitz case shows this perfectly. The structural flaw I mentioned, it's the necessary precondition for this kind of strategic exploitation. Prediction doesn't stop the system from being hijacked. It just, tells you when the car's about to go over the cliff. Historically, government agencies have explicitly used phenomena like UFO narratives, which some describe as a kind of multi-dimensional thermostat tweaking our consciousness. They use it as an avatar to divert
The smokescreen idea.
Exactly. And the Benowitz case gives us chilling, concrete evidence of this strategic weaponization. Paul Benowitz, the physicist, he believed he was tracking alien signals near Kirtland Air Force Base. The Air Force Office of Special Investigations, the AFOSI, they saw his research as a threat because, well, he was actually stumbling onto highly classified stealth tech tests happening right there in New Mexico. So what did they do? They didn't just ignore him. They actively fed him the hypersensational alien narrative. We're talking forged documents, complex alien codes, elaborate stories about underground bases, all designed to discredit him. This systematic use of a false story, a calculated smokescreen for real-world military secrets, it just proves that the structural vulnerability, the linguistic rift, can be reliably hijacked for control by sophisticated actors.
Okay, I absolutely see the immediate danger of that kind of strategic exploitation. It's undeniable. But the fact that the AFOSI successfully hijacked what you might call the control system for their own, earthly spook games, that actually confirms my point that the system is ultimately mechanistic and therefore manageable. If the structural flaw was truly an escapable cage, their success would seem random, right? But they didn't rely on random chance. They exploited a quantifiable psychological process, socially shared retrieval-induced forgetting, or SSRIF.
Explain that a bit.
Sure. SSRIF is a known cognitive effect. Basically, when you retrieve some memories, it actively inhibits or makes it harder to retrieve related but unmentioned memories. So, by forcing the collective conversation, both Benowitz and the wider publics, to focus intensely and repeatedly on the fabricated hyperstitional narrative, the alien codes, the bases, they induced people to systematically forget the true unmentioned military details. The stealth tests. This is evidence that control hinges on controlling the conversation, controlling the focus. And that's a process we can measure with contagion models, with psychological models. Yes, it's sophisticated psychological warfare, but its very predictability means we can measure the dose, understand the effect, and potentially build immunity.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that the precision of the method negates the sheer profundity of the underlying structural error. I think you're overemphasizing our ability to control and really underemphasizing the fundamental cognitive error that allows these false realities to scale up in the first place. The reason hyperstition takes hold so easily is rooted in the individual's inability to accurately assess their own knowledge, their own memory state. It makes them highly susceptible to any narrative that seems to resolve that internal linguistic conflict I talked about.
In this cognitive risk, it's formalized in the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? Knowing just enough to be confidently wrong, but not enough to even see the error. We see this issue play out constantly. Think about cases where individuals might have genuinely big ideas, like the actor Terence Howard and his mathematical claims. They promote theories that ultimately fail the absolute bedrock standards of science, reproducibility, and peer review. The individual's confident, internally consistent idea gets amplified instantly, often without external validity, precisely because the structural cage of language lets it bypass rigorous vetting in the public sphere. It really highlights how easily confident conviction can substitute for reproducible reality. And that's the societal danger we need to address if we want good, big ideas to flourish and bad ones to wither.
That's a compelling argument about the danger of, let's say, self-generated illusions scaling up. But even the failure of large-scale error propagation, like a bad idea spreading, is also mathematically predictable. And that predictability gives us a clear path to prevent that kind of widespread disillusionment and perhaps ensure that genuinely correct big ideas do survive scrutiny. You mentioned the speed of propagation, and the data absolutely supports that.
Mathematical models of social contagion show that something like 64% of individual false memories can become collectively shared within just 3 discussion rounds.
Yes.
It is, but the same data provides the defense. Collective memory doesn't just spread, it also decays, following a predictable 2-phase model. There's a specific switching point that occurs reliably around 10 to 11 days after attention on the topic peaks. This scientific knowledge gives us a crucial metric, the timing of that peak attention. It helps us decide, do we intervene immediately with overwhelming evidence, demand objective verification, or do we simply let the illusory consensus decay naturally according to its mathematical schedule? We don't necessarily have to fight every single fire. We just need to understand the physics of how it burns out.
The problem, though, I think it goes deeper than social modeling or timing windows. We might need to look deeper at the very source of the memory, of reality itself. The scientific framework, particularly leaning into quantum cognition ideas, suggests something pretty profound. When groups collectively discuss ambiguous memory states using our fragmented language, like that nostalgia, déjà vu conflict, they might actually be engaging in a form of collective measurement. The underlying memory state might exist initially in a kind of superposition, neither definitively true nor false, much like a quantum particle before you observe it.
Okay, a superposition of memory states.
Linguistic consensus, the act of agreeing on a description, acts like the observation in quantum physics. It forces the memory wave function, if you will, to collapse into a single classical reality. That becomes the consensus reality, whether it's the actual past or, the widespread Berenstain-Bears effect where many people share a false memory. This isn't just about bad social spread or even deliberate manipulation anymore. It suggests that we, through the very architecture of our language, are the active architects of the glitch. We are literally defining which version of the past solidifies.
I admit the quantum collapse idea is intellectually intriguing, very powerful metaphorically, but the practical question is, how do we move that from a fascinating theoretical concept to an actionable defense against hyperstition right now? While that link to quantum cognition is thought-provoking, the actionable reality for me remains the measurable data we already established. The key lesson from critiquing non-peer-reviewed theories, like the Howard example, the ones that fail reproducibility, is that our greatest defense against collapsing into convenient delusion is the scientific method itself. We must demand objective verification. We need reproducible results to ensure that big ideas are actually correct, not just compelling narratives. Our defense isn't found in accepting some philosophical structural fate. It's in focusing relentlessly on the observable, quantifiable mechanisms, the N400 signal, the 72% prediction accuracy, the 10-11-day decay window. These things generate falsifiable predictions. They offer a tangible way forward rather than surrendering to the, yes, profound, but ultimately abstract implications of a collective measurement collapse. The data empowers us. It lets us define reality based on evidence, not just linguistic convenience or collective agreement.
Conclusion. So to sum up my view, the framework really demonstrates a profound, almost foundational conflict. It's between the brain's innate drive for unified experience and the, frankly, restrictive categories imposed by our language. This structural cage creates a predictable, yes but immediate vulnerability, that 100-200 millisecond cognitive hiccup. And that ensures that hyperstition and the strategic fabrication of collective reality will continue to be a successful strategy, whether by state actors or just confidently incorrect individuals. It remains, I think, inherent in our cognitive architecture, regardless of our predictive models.
And from my perspective, complexity like this often needs multiple viewpoints to really appreciate it. I think we've moved beyond just observing these anomalies, these glitches in memory. We now possess the neural and mathematical mechanics from seeing that 72% corruption prediction potential to understanding the precise 10-11-day decay window for collective attention. This knowledge, I argue, provides the actual basis for a strategic, scientific resistance against manipulation. It fundamentally changes our capacity to navigate consensus reality.
We have the roadmap, or at least the beginnings of one, to counter the engineered reality and properly vet our biggest, most important ideas for truth.
Well, the material certainly illustrates that the debate over reality itself now really hinges on this intricate interplay between our cognitive architecture, how our brains are built, and the language we choose or are forced to use. There's clearly much more to explore within this fascinating convergence of neuroscience, language, and social dynamics.